think it is about time, so we will go ahead and get going here. Welcome to our Caregiver Skills Clinic on the topic of meals and eating. This is a community dementia education program for care partners of Alzheimer's San Diego, and we will be sure to tell you more about Alzheimer's San Diego at the end of the webinar here today. Just a quick introduction for those that haven't met me in person or virtually yet. My name is Amy Abrams, and I am the Director of Education with Alzheimer's San Diego. Something I don't often talk about in a lot of our programs is the fact that I am what's called a Certified Positive Approach to Care trainer. This is a technique that was developed by a truly remarkable occupational therapist named Teepa Snow, who developed the method that we call the positive approach to care. So I am going to be covering a lot of topics here today that were taught to me by Teepa Snow and her team. So I just wanted to be sure in my introduction that I acknowledge that. With me here today, I'm very pleased to introduce you to Marcy. Marcy is a licensed clinical social worker, a member of our family services team at Alzheimer's San Diego, and she will be on the webinar with me here today, responding in the chat, helping to respond to questions, and then coming on and chatting with me a little bit later on in the webinar. So welcome, Marcy. I just want to say that today's program is a little bit unique in that it is a skills clinic. We delivered in-person skills clinics on a monthly basis back when we were able to do in-person programming at the Alzheimer's San Diego office. We did demonstrations. My colleague, Jean Alton, who teaches a lot of programs with me, she and I were able to do demonstrations together. We could do hand-on-hand, touching each other kinds of demonstrations in person together. We can't do that, obviously. I am going to have a helper with me here today, though, to do a couple of kind of live demonstrations with you here. I'm working from home right now, as most people are. So I just want to acknowledge that things might get a little weird. I've got multiple computers and multiple cameras going, and I'm going to do my very best to keep everything going smoothly. We've done a run through. It was all working as of a little while ago, and I hope that it will continue to work too. But on that note of just sort of the practicalities of Zoom webinar, I appreciate your patience with me here today while we kind of work through the bugs and figure out how to develop Skills Clinic in a helpful way in the online environment. We're all doing our best here, right? That's a big lesson in providing dementia care of any kind, right? You do the best with the information and the tools that you have in that moment. So that's what we're going to be demonstrating here today. So here's our agenda. I'm going to talk with you first about the brain changes that happen in dementia and how they affect a person's appetite, the way that they eat and drink, so that the sort of considerations we need to take as professionals or as family care partners who are supporting somebody in meal preparation, or the actual, ins and outs of in-person meal time. Give you some tips for meal planning, talk a little bit about appetite changes that are common in people with dementia, give you some suggestions with regard to meal planning. And then again, we'll be doing some demonstrations of some techniques that are used to provide safe help and support to somebody who's living with dementia with eating and drinking. And then of course we will connect you with some resources for more learning and additional support if you need it. Because again, we know, this is education and we will do our best to address individual questions. But we know your situation is unique and specific. So while we may not be able to answer every question or apply these concepts to your particular, kitchen or dining room or environment where you're providing this support, we'll definitely be doing our best. We are going to be pausing twice during the program if the timing works. If everything goes according to plan, we'll be pausing to take some questions. So you don't have to wait to submit questions. You can certainly type those in at any time. So here we go. Let's start first with just a brief overview of what happens to the changing brain in a person who is living with dementia. I'm going to keep this fairly brief because we do cover it in other programs, but it is important that if you haven't attended one of those programs before, I do want everyone to have some foundational understanding of what we're talking about when we describe the symptoms of dementia and how they impact a person's appetite and their ability to eat the way that they used to. Right? So dementia is the umbrella term that we use for the wide range. There's dozens of different types of dementia, the medical conditions that cause symptoms like memory loss, behavioral changes, changes in perception and judgment, cognition and thinking and problem solving, and then there are some key physical symptoms of dementia as well. So it's much more than merely a memory problem. That's not to say that memory problems aren't significant and that they aren't an inconvenience. But dementia is more than a memory problem, right? If a person who is living with dementia only had a memory problem, right, one could just say, well, no, you haven't had breakfast yet today, right? It's time to sit down and eat. And they'd say, oh, right, I forgot. Yeah, let's sit down and have some breakfast, right? But we know that there's much more to it than that. So most forms of dementia start in the medial temporal lobes of the brain, and then they sort of spread the pathology, whatever type of dementia it is. If it's Alzheimer's disease, it's likely to start in the temporal lobe, spread up into the frontal lobe of the brain, then back into the parietal lobe, eventually reaching the occipital cerebellum regions of the brain and the brain stem. That's just a sort of a broad generalization. Every type of dementia is different. No two people will experience any particular type of dementia exactly the same way. But to give you a sense of some of the changes that, I want to be careful in how I say this, they are to be expected in a person with dementia. They're not normal, right? None of this is a normal part of aging, but they are common in people who are living with dementia. I think it's important to kind of talk through the different regions of the brain and what symptoms the damage there can cause. So when there's damage in the temporal lobes of the brain, this is where we're going to see difficulty with rapid forgetting, short-term memory loss. This is what causes those, sometimes just momentary, sometimes longer moments of disorientation or difficulty with sequencing in particular, right? Being able to sit down to a meal, sort of go through the normal motions of opening your napkin and putting it down on your lap, taking your utensil, right? Knowing where you like to start, knowing sort of the social rules of how mealtime works, right? All of that does require us to have an ability to not only remember those steps, but be able to do them in their proper sequence. And that's difficult for people with dementia. And I'm not just talking about people in the later stages of the disease, even very early on. Tasks like meal preparation, following recipes, setting the table, sort of sitting down to the rituals of a meal can become difficult. When there's damage in the frontal lobe of the brain, this very large region, which there's lots of different structures there in the frontal lobe, when there's damage in the frontal lobe of the brain, we see a lot of different changes, primarily behavioral in nature. This can look like a lot of different things. In many people, it looks like simple withdrawal, right? Just kind of refusal. No, thanks. I don't feel like eating. No, that doesn't sound good. No, I don't want to go for a walk. No, I don't want to help you, stirring the soup, whatever the thing might be. Simple withdrawal, refusal. This can be a really challenging symptom for us as care partners. But this is the part of our brain also that is very involved in decision-making, taking in information and deciding what to do with it. So it's often referred to as the CEO of our brain. And so when there's damage in the structures of the frontal lobe, we're likely to see changes in a person's appetite, how they eat, when they eat, changes to their preferences. When there's damage in the frontal lobe, very, very common for people to crave sweets. If you've noticed that in the person that you're caring for or in yourself, if you're a person who's living with dementia, that's very normal. Our frontal lobe uses a lot of sugar. And so when there's damage there, it's burning a lot of glucose. When there's damage there, we do see people craving sugar pretty frequently. But there's also just, changes in how people sort of treat their loved ones, the things they say, the things they do, right? If my husband were to put down a meal in front of me and it didn't look good to me, or that just didn't sound good to me, right? I probably still, if my frontal lobe is healthy, I've got enough sort of ability to regulate my thoughts and my emotions to say, I'm not really hungry. I think I'll just maybe have a few bites of this, right? And sort of gently and kindly reject the food if it's not what I want. A person with dementia may not be able to do that, right? If they're looking at something and maybe because of the memory problems, because of their perception problems, they don't recognize what it is. It doesn't sound good to them, right? They think they don't like that food, right? No, I hate broccoli, even though perfectly well they've always loved broccoli, right? Those kinds of changes are very common. And if you're trying to insist to me that, no, you've always liked broccoli and I made this specially for you, right? I may not have the cognitive capacity to say, you worked really hard on this meal. Maybe I should just have a couple of bites, right? That takes a lot of cognitive ability to do that and a lot of ability to regulate one's own emotions. And a person with dementia is likely to struggle with that, to be a lot more impulsive and just to, sort of shove the food away, to say, no, I hate this. I don't want this. This is gross, right? To say and do things that are out of character for them. When the damage kind of spreads into the parietal, occipital, and cerebellum lobes of the brain, we're likely to see more difficulty with language, right? Controlling our verbal language and understanding other people's spoken or written language, difficulty with problem solving, right? Using utensils is a great example of problem solving, right? The ability to how exactly do I need to stab this piece of lettuce with this fork in order to get it onto my fork and then get it into my mouth. Even very simple problems can be difficult for a person who's got damage in the parietal and occipital lobes of the brain. A big part of that is difficulty with recognizing the function of an object, right? I might want you to put on a bib because we're having a messy soup and I don't want you to get it all over your shirt, right? As I approach you with that bib, you may not recognize what that is. As I'm approaching you with a napkin to dab your face, right? It may not be clear to the person who's living with dementia, oh, this is just a soft piece of cloth. This isn't going to hurt me, right? So recognition of the function of an object is key to our ability to use utensils and sort of engage in normal mealtime activity. And then finally, there are often dramatic changes in a person's physical function as a result of dementia. So we may see changes in a person's overall muscular strength, their fine motor skill. Obviously, that's going to have a big impact on a person's ability to hold a glass of water, to sip through a straw, to use a fork, right? To do all of the things that we do during mealtime. Sensory perception often changes. It's not that, the structures don't change. Your nose still allows you to smell things, but your brain doesn't process things the way that it used to, right? I might hear someone say my name, but my brain might not sort of connect the dots and allow me to understand, that is my name being called from over my shoulder back there, right? So sensory perception does change dramatically, in particular, the visual field, which we'll spend a little extra time talking about here in a moment. Additionally, it is not uncommon at all for us to see people in the late stages of dementia, but it can happen earlier as well. People have a condition that is called dysphagia or dysphagia. It's pronounced two different ways properly, I recently learned. Swallowing difficulty, having a hard time getting thin liquids down, getting a bolus, a big bite, a big chunk of food down the esophagus, right? The brain, the cerebellum in particular, is sending signals to your esophagus and telling it, okay, that stuff that's coming down right now, that's air, send it to the lungs. That's liquid, that's food, right? Send it into the gut, into the digestive tract. So people with dementia, those signals are getting sort of crossed and mistaken. And so they begin to have difficulty. It might just be sort of gurgly sounds, right? The saliva is collecting on top of the larynx, and so we hear this kind of gurgle, or it may be actual coughing. Eventually, late in the disease, many people will struggle with being able to eat and drink regular food, which we are going to talk about in a little more detail here. So I want to spend a moment talking about the changing visual field in particular, because this is so relevant to the topic of mealtime and how we eat. So please know the caveat here is that I'm talking about individuals who had normal vision before the onset of dementia symptoms. So if a person has visual impairment, macular degeneration, or is blind, right? Of course, there's some differences here. But talking about folks who had normal vision before the symptoms of dementia, most of us have a pretty wide field of vision. So if you're able to see the screen right now, if this were your vista, you're standing maybe at a viewpoint looking at this beautiful view, right? Depending on your age, you're going to be able to see most of this field of vision, right? As we get older, our field of peripheral vision absolutely naturally shrinks a bit. Some of that is to be expected. But in persons who are living with dementia, this visual field shrinks dramatically. So in the early stage of dementia, many people, and this is sort of shocking to learn, I think, for a lot of us, many people experience, even in the very early stages of dementia, a view that we would describe as tunnel vision, right? Scuba vision, meaning scuba view. It's kind of like, do this if you're sitting at a computer and you have free hands. Give yourself this view, right? Pretend you're wearing a scuba mask and see how different your environment looks, right? When you can't see the full range of social context of what's going on around you. Also, it significantly changes your depth perception, right? Everything seems to be much closer up when you have a more narrow field of vision. As the disease progresses, we see that visual field shrink more and more. Right, so by the middle stage of the disease, and there's no clear early, middle, late, for example. So just bear with me here. Everybody's a little bit different here. But in the mid stage of the disease, we're likely to see a person experiencing binocular view, right? More like wearing a pair of binoculars, really not being able to take in very much at one time. We call this task vision, and it's very relevant to the topic of mealtime, because if I'm a person in the mid stage of dementia and I've got task vision and I don't have this ready, but I've got my plate here in front of me, right? It's sitting on the table in front of me. If I am trying to pay attention to what I'm doing with my fork, right? When I'm looking down like this, all I can really see is that fork and a little bit of my plate, right? That's about all I can take in at once. If you start talking to me, if you come up from behind me and touch me, right? Even if it's nice, it's just a supportive help, right? If I've got task vision, I was looking down here, I didn't know you were there, right? Especially if I've got that short-term memory loss. If I didn't know that you were there, you're gonna startle me, you're gonna distract me. I've now looked up, right, from my task of eating. I'm now paying attention to what's up here. I'm no longer paying attention to what's going on the plate in front of me. So task vision is a very important part of sort of understanding the difficulty with focus and attention that we see in people who are living with dementia. And then again, it just continues to shrink more and more as the disease progresses. By the later stage of the disease, people often have what's called monocular view. It's not that they can't see out of both of their eyes, but the brain really struggles to process information from both eyes at the same time. So it's monocular vision, and this is, an object that looks like this to me, a fork. When I'm looking at it with binocular view, it looks like a fork. If I'm looking at that through one closed eye, right, that one half of a binocular, I may not even be able to recognize that that is a fork. Right, so we're very likely to see object confusion in that stage of the disease. And then in the very late stage, frequently there is partial, if not complete, vision loss. Blindness, full blindness is not a common part of dementia, just a very narrow field of vision, not uncommon at all in the late stage. So I hope you can see that this does have significant consequences for the way we need to approach a person at mealtime and approach a person when we're trying to help them. So a couple of things to keep in mind before we start getting into the ins and outs of meal planning and the technical aspects of helping a person. A few just sort of reminders I want everyone to keep in mind here. Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia are progressive, right? People do lose function over time. They don't regain it. Frequently, we are helping somebody with the goal of trying to help them learn a new skill to regain something that they've lost, or to be as independent as possible. And these are absolutely worthy goals with somebody who is experiencing a temporary setback, right? They've lost strength or ability because of a fracture maybe. They've lost skill or strength or endurance because of a protracted illness, for example. Right? Dementia is different in that we don't expect for people to get better over time, unfortunately, at this moment. Right? We hope that will not be the case in the near future. But at the moment, we have to expect a person who's living with Alzheimer's or another type of dementia to progressively lose function over time. So every day, really, we as care partners have to kind of reassess, where is this person today? What can I do to help them feel as autonomous and as in control of their situation as possible? Independence is not really a realistic goal, but helping somebody feel as in charge, as in control of their daily life, or even just feeling fully in control of this movement of using my fork, right? These moments of autonomy that we can give people that are living with dementia, these are worthy goals. So in everything I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to reinforce this message a lot. We really want to do tasks, eating, drinking, putting on the bib, dabbing our face with the napkin, whatever it might be. We want to do things with the person who's living with dementia, not do them to them, right? I'm coming at you, I'm trying to do this with the camera, right? I'm coming at you with a big, sharp, pointy object of a fork, right? I'm giving you the food, right? It feels uncomfortable. Depending on where I'm at in terms of my vision, that might actually feel very scary to me. It might feel like a threat. We don't want to do meals to the person, right? We want to make this an experience we're eating together. So I'm going to hopefully show you how we do that. All of this requires us to be infinitely flexible, right? Being reasonable about our expectations of them, but also reasonable about our expectations of ourselves, just being as flexible as we can. So I'm going to pause here. We have a couple minutes here, Marcy. Any questions come in?
Yes, I have a couple here that I think would be great. Mom recently started chewing her pills in the morning instead of swallowing them. I'm not sure why. She doesn't seem to have problems swallowing them. Any suggestions to keep her from chewing them?
Oh, that's a really interesting dilemma. And I would say, I mean, that doesn't actually surprise me, because most of us, right, if a solid object hits our tongue, right, unless you're really aware this is something I'm not supposed to chew, right, most of us, that's going to be our impulse. Something solid lands on our tongue, our instinct is going to be to chew it up, right? Most people like me who eat too fast, right? We've been taught to slow down and chew. So she's probably just following a very old script. She's got procedural memory. The pills are feeling like food to her. So I would say maybe I'm going to be showing you an example of how we model eating for another person. You might model taking a medicine for her, right? So if you have a medicine that you can take at the same time, or you have a Skittle or a little raisin or something that you can, sort of show her, here, let's put it on the tongue, right? Kind of walk her through what you're doing. I'm not going to chew it. I'm just going to swallow it, right? To sort of show her that behavior, that might help. You might also just check in. No matter what, I'd say check in with the doctor or the pharmacist. Ask the question, is it a problem if she chews it, right? If she doesn't mind the taste and it's not going to affect the effectiveness of the pill, I'd actually say don't worry about this. But you don't want to just assume that. You do want to talk with the doctor or the pharmacist, because some pills' effectiveness will be affected, will be impacted negatively by the breaking up of the pill itself. So talk with the doctor or pharmacist. You might consider putting it in a soft food, right? A pudding, an applesauce, a yogurt, some ice cream if she's a sweet lover, putting it in something that is swallowable, right? Something that she wouldn't be likely to chew. Food that's cool and soft like that, we don't usually have the impulse to chew it. But you do, again, you want to talk with the doctor or the pharmacist in particular about whether or not that would be safe for that particular med.
Okay. Amy, do you feel that somebody is asking whether or not they should take their mom for a vision test?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it hasn't been checked in a while, thanks for asking that question. If it hasn't been checked in a while, absolutely, because I mean, while we can't do anything about this narrowing field of vision, corrective lenses may help mitigate some of the loss that the person is experiencing. So yes, but you do want to make sure that the eye doctor, the optometrist, ophthalmologist knows that the person has dementia. And if you can give them any kind of a sense of what their diagnosis is and what stage they're in, that will be helpful because, of course, that's going to help them interpret the results of those tests. But yes, absolutely, we want to keep using corrective lenses, right, doing what we can to keep people's vision as healthy as possible through this disease. Yeah, thanks.
Great. Why does the same food or beverage taste okay one day and the next time it is served in a week or so, it is rejected as not tasting good or maybe not the same as before?
Yes, this is so common and so frustrating as a care partner because you sort of feel like, yeah, I finally found something he or she is willing to eat. And only half the time are they really willing to eat it. This comes down to unfortunately, the maddening guessing game of these brain changes, right? It's really about the person's perception of that sensory information in that moment. Today, it looks different, it smells different, it has a different texture to them. It hasn't actually changed, right? It's the person's the brain's interpretation of what it looks like, smells like, feels like on the tongue, right? And today, I don't like it, right? It's a very frustrating situation for us as caregivers, but it is kind of a reality we just have to accept. We give it a try, see if they like it. If they don't like it today, right, we try again tomorrow. We come prepared with backups and substitutions, other things that might work. But instead of trying to, sort of convince the person, you do like this, you just ate it yesterday, right? We can engage in that kind of headbutting all day long, and you're really not going to get anywhere, right? If you're trying to convince me, I take a piece of black licorice, I hate black licorice, right? You give me a piece of black licorice right now and try to convince me that I loved black licorice yesterday. You're not going to convince me of that. You can try all day long, right? So we just have to be where the person is in that moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have time for a couple more, Amy?
I think we kind of need to keep moving. Let's do one more, and then we'll
one
keep.
more. This should be easy. Do you have any suggestions for easy to chew, not too spicy foods to serve for dinner?
Oh gosh, I wish I was. I wish I was a better cook. Let's see. Right off the top, I wish I was better prepared to answer this question. Right off the top of my head, right, I'd say, nutrition is nutrition, and people with dementia are likely to crave sugar, as I said before, more than they used to. So doing things that involve fruit, right, that involve dairy, if they can tolerate it, that's often going to make the meal a lot more appealing to the person. And it also can kind of counteract some of the spiciness, right? You're generally like yogurt, it's going to cool something down. The sweetness of some fruit in a meat dish, for example, right, is really going to help that. So I'd say if you can incorporate healthy sugars, that's a good way to sort of serve a plain, simple meal that's digestible and easy. But in terms of blandness, I mean, it's such a personal. Taste is so unique and so personal, right? What I would describe as bland, Marcy might not think is bland at all, right? We have very different tastes, I'm sure, just because we're two very different people. So I'd say, right, just keeping things as simple as you can, right? Reducing the amount of extra spice and salt and pepper that you're using. Fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, you can really never go wrong with giving those a try and seeing how they respond to them. It's very rare. Except for things like, the onions and garlic, right? Some of the peppers, it's very rare that a vegetable is going to be too spicy or too flavorful for someone. So just stick with the very simple sort of elemental chicken, potatoes, salads, right? The simpler the food, probably the easier to tolerate.
Maybe comfort foods like mac and cheese or something.
Ooh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good one. Really can't go
Okay.
wrong with stuff like that, right? I mean, of course, you really need to keep the person's dietary considerations in check. If you need to be really closely monitoring salt, sodium, cholesterol, right? A lot of doctors these days will say, let's stop worrying about cholesterol at this point, let's enjoy. But when it comes to salt intake, right? If a person is at high risk of a stroke, you don't want to just throw that advisory out the window, right? Or if a person has type 2 diabetes, we're not going to, be having ice cream for dinner. But for the most part, we do, when I talk about being flexible and changing your expectations, right? Most meals, most of the comfort foods, give them a try, right? Maybe it's not the healthiest, but it gets some calories and some nutrition in, right? Let's do it.
Great. Thanks, Amy. I'll save the others for later.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, now we'll talk a little bit about meal planning. Actually, we kind of already got into this, which is really nice. So consider the environment around the person, right? When a person with dementia, think back to those brain changes that I talked about before. Disorientation, not being able to recognize the function of an object, right? Is the person going to be struggling to recognize where they are, what they're supposed to do in this place? So whenever you can, try to serve meals in an environment that is familiar to the person. That's not always possible. And there's also the possibility that they could be in their own dining room of 50 years and not recognize it in that moment as being their dining room of 50 years. So you have to, again, be reasonable, be flexible, but try to serve meals in a familiar environment. Consider the seating, the comfort of the chair, the accessibility of the chair. The demonstration that I'm going to give you, of course, is in my own dining room. I don't have a person living with dementia here in my house, so I don't have great seating. I don't have a very accessible environment. It's not an optimal setup for me as a care partner to a person who's living with dementia. But you do want to have seats that are easy for the person, right? They're not on wheels or casters, so they could easily fall or slip. It's easy for you as a care partner to move around, right, in the space around them. Chairs with arms are great because of those changes in strength and muscular ability. Many people will need arms on their chairs for getting up and down. So generally, just making sure that the seating is comfortable and accessible to them. Bright lighting. Dining rooms, places where we eat, we don't actually tend to pay that much attention to how good the lighting is, right? If there's a lamp overhead, it's good to go. People with dementia, often because of those brain changes that I was talking about and the difficulty with perception, right, they may need extra bright lighting to be able to take in what it is that they're seeing. When you did this, your scuba vision, right, think about even if, you're not actually creating shadow, just everything appears a bit darker. Everything is a bit harder to take in and understand. But when it's brightly illuminated, and not just from above, but also from the sides, table lamps, those kinds of things to keep light coming from multiple directions can really help. Make the room comfortable in terms of temperature, right? Things like, I'm just too hot, or nobody likes to eat when they're really hot, or the being cold can be a huge distraction, right? And if I'm a person who's living with mid-stage dementia, I'm sitting here in this dining room and I'm freezing cold, but I don't know how to recognize what that discomfort means. I don't know how to ask you for a blanket or for a wrap or to please turn the heat up, right? I'm going to be very distracted from the experience of eating. So doing what you can to keep the room a comfortable temperature for them, reducing clutter and distraction as much as you can. If it's mealtime, remember that task vision that I was talking about, that difficulty with focus and attention, right? If it's mealtime and we have all kinds of other stuff on the dining table or on the table wherever you're eating. I don't want to assume everybody eats at a dining table, right? People eat at bars and on their couches and many other on their patios outside right now, in many other places. But if that room, if that space has a lot going on, right? There's junk on the table that's going to sort of draw their attention away from the meal that you're trying to serve. If there is television programming or radio or kids or animals, things running around, making noise, causing distractions for them, you're going to have a harder time getting them to focus on the task at hand. So maybe a little music, right, might help to create some some mood, might help the person relax, right? But probably not music that is, high tempo, something that they're going to sing along to. You don't want to be singing during mealtime. So I want to give you a couple tips on setting a table effectively for a person with dementia. First of all, we really have to kind of let go of table settings like this, right? This is beautiful. This is lovely at Thanksgiving time or, any time if you're a really fancy person. This is a lot for a person with dementia to take in, right? How many plates are there, right? I might not even actually be able to tell that there's 3 different plates there, given my limited field of vision, my difficulty with recognizing the function of an object, right? For somebody that's got difficulty with fine motor skill, you're asking a lot with those 3 different crystal goblets sitting there, right? So this is lovely for special occasions that don't involve, right, a person with dementia who's sitting down to try to enjoy a meal. You're probably unfortunately, taking a little something away from the experience with them. Instead, simplify. Something you notice about this, it's not fancy. You can maybe have flowers or, something on the table if that's not going to be a distraction to them. If you want a little color, you can certainly use colored dishes. And in fact, many dementia experts recommend using red plates if you can find them. They do sell some specific sets of red plates and bowls for serving meals to people who are living with dementia because it is believed to help stimulate the appetite, which is very interesting. But regardless, what you want is contrast, right? You see that in this image here. That's what's so helpful about this. There's only one fork to use. You don't have to decide which one, right? There's probably a cup of some kind or a mug sitting somewhere off in view here. It's there, that's where the liquid's gonna be, right? You don't have to choose which of these spoons am I supposed to pick up. You don't have multiple plates to crash around and drop, right? And whatever is on that white plate of food, you're gonna be able to see it really well. There's a dark background behind it, the cloth or the napkin or the placemat that's behind it, or just the surface of the table, right? What you're really after is creating contrast so that whatever is sitting on that plate is really visible and again, just kind of understandable to the person who's living with dementia. So contrasting colors, using adaptive dinnerware and utensils when you can. I showed you these a moment ago, but you probably didn't notice something cool about this little plate that I was holding up. It's kind of a hybrid between a plate and a bowl. You can buy these just for a few dollars on Amazon or, anywhere if you don't want to shop at Amazon. And it's got a lip so that if I'm, trying to show you, I'm trying to chase something around, on my plate, right? Go back to this image, right? I'm trying to, pick up a piece of salad or a piece of chicken or something on that plate. I might just be running it right off onto the tablecloth, right? Whereas with this, there's a lip here so that I can just scoop it right up. And another thing that's really great about it is that it's got these sort of rubberized feet on it so it doesn't slide. So the person can just have it sitting on the table and get the food right up into their mouth without any of those problems. Adaptive utensils may be helpful. This isn't helpful to everybody, but if a person is living with arthritis or has grip or dexterity problems, these thick rubberized handles can be very helpful, but I'll be showing you how to help a person who's not able to use those independently, which may eventually happen. Use mealtime as an anchor in the day. What we mean by that is if it's breakfast time, right? Think about difficulty with orientation to time and place that a person with dementia is likely to experience. Remember that the meal itself can be a really centering and anchoring moment for that person. So if it's breakfast, make the plate look like breakfast, right? Don't serve something that looks to them like lunch food or dinner food, right? So breakfast for dinner is something that many of us enjoy. I definitely enjoy that. That could be actually very difficult for a person with dementia, right? Eating scrambled eggs or waffles or things that they associate with breakfast time, right? Consider, want them to be kind of winding down their day. They're having difficulty sleeping or, sort of slowing things down in the evening. Maybe don't serve them breakfast for dinner, right? That could be sending sort of mixed signals to their brain. If this is somebody that loves eggs and waffles 3 meals a day, then throw what I just said right out the window, right? Because the person's individual preferences are always more important. Remember the use of sensory cues. Smelling food is often, if you have a way to use fragrances to enhance your cooking, great. But even if you're just sort of maybe putting a boiling pot of broth on the stove to simmer to sort of fill the space with the smell of chicken soup, right? Doing what you can to sort of set off those sensory cues will often help when somebody does not have a good, strong appetite. Do you smell that? It smells like dinner must be getting ready, right? It must be soon, if you can both smell that together. As best you can, honor who they are as an individual person, their habits, their routines, their traditions around eating. Some of this has to go, right? Certainly, if they are somebody who loved the big elaborate place setting like I showed you, there may just come a time that we can't honor that particular preference or ritual or routine anymore because they're not able to eat that way. Right. But as best we can, if they were always an early bird eater, try to help them continue to be an early bird eater. If they really love to have a cup of coffee or a glass of wine with their meal, and that's now contraindicated, right? Because the coffee keeps them up or the alcohol causes problems, right? Do what you can to serve something else in a glass that, sort of keeps them connected to the ritual of the glass of wine with dinner, or serve decaf or tea or something instead of the coffee. Doing what you can to, again, help things feel as normal and as routine and habitual to the person as you can. Again, I already talked a bit about limiting distractions, really, really important. And this, I think, is my favorite tip. It's so simple, it's so essential, but it's so critical. Eating is a social thing, right? For most of us, unless you live alone, right? And that's different. Most people have eaten most of their meals with someone else, right? And so if I am living with dementia and my husband sits me down in that seat, puts dinner in front of me, and then walks away, right? This is not how we've eaten dinner for the 20, 30, 40 years of our life together. I'm probably just going to sit there and wait for him to come, right? I'll start eating when you sit down because eating is something that we do together. There's also the benefit of a lot of people with dementia. When there's damage in that frontal lobe, one of the cognitive changes we see is that they can actually handle the task of eating, but they need someone to kind of kickstart it, right? They're having difficulty with initiating the task of eating. So if I sit down with you and I start taking in my first few sips of soup, right, then I might be triggering your brain. Oh, right, here's my spoon and here's my soup. I'm going to start eating too, right? So making meals something that we do together. I know the life of a caregiver does not always make that possible, right? You might and you may not be eating the same food, right? You may not be hungry yet. They get hungry at 5 and you don't like to eat till 7. Understood, right? Sit down, do something, right, that sort of looks and feels like you're having that meal together. Put a little plate of something in front of yourself, or just have a cup of tea, right? Something so that you're going through the rituals and the routines of eating with them. This really helps it feel much less like, here's your dinner, right? That's giving somebody a meal, that's doing something to them rather than having this experience together, doing it with them. So some thoughts on choosing foods. You guys have already asked some good questions in this, so I'll keep it kind of brief, but we can come back to it if you've got more questions. Just keep in mind, tastes are very likely to change. I did mention that many people with many different types of dementia, especially dementia that is affecting the frontal lobes of the brain, are very likely to crave sweets. But also just generally, if I've always really loved chicken and now you put down the chicken and I'm like, gross, right? I've never liked chicken, right? Changing taste is just a matter of the changing sensory processing abilities. It doesn't mean that I secretly always hated the way you cook chicken, right? It's just a change in my brain. So recognizing that what they've always loved may not be something that they love today. But also that presents us with new opportunities when we're helping somebody, when we're planning meals, things they didn't like before, you might be able to try reintegrating them, right? My husband's always hated beets. Maybe now he might give it a try because he likes his brain is craving sugar in ways that it didn't before, right? Maybe I can get a new nutritious food into our diet that I wasn't able to use before. Using sweeteners, again, of course, we want to be reasonable and cautious about this. Don't add sugar to everything, but adding fruit, adding yogurt, or other things that have sort of the natural sugars can really help make food feel more appealing. A lot of people say, boy, she never used ketchup before. Now she wants ketchup on everything, right? Well, okay, maybe it's not so tasteful. It's not the way you wanted your meal to be served, but if dipping each bite in a little bit of ketchup gets it down, right? Again, being flexible and changing our expectations, being mindful of texture and consistency. Everybody likes to have a little crunch, right? A meal that's all mush, if we can avoid it, is preferable. Eventually, right, if a person has swallowing difficulty, we're going to have to address that. But generally speaking, if you can make the meal sort of varied in its color, in its texture, right, make the plate as appealing as possible while being reasonable on yourself, that's going to help with the stimulation of the appetite and make the food more interesting to kind of dig into. Finger foods are really, when we talk about changing your expectations and being reasonable, keep this in mind, right? Any food can really be a finger food, with a few exceptions. It is hard to eat soup with your fingers. But other than that, if I wanted to eat that salad, right, I'm enjoying fresh, crunchy vegetables. I'm getting my nutrients, but just, using a fork is just getting too complicated, too difficult for me, right? Maybe have the dressing on the side. Let me eat my salad with my fingers and dip, right? If my brain can still do that, let me do that, right? Allowing people to be as autonomous as possible. Using more finger food, things that can be cut into clean and easy to pick up pieces is, of course, a great place to start. But also just sort of adjust your idea about what finger food is. I kind of hit on this already, but when planning meals for the day, think about the timing, the schedule of the meals, what's going to work for the person who's living with dementia in terms of their actual hunger levels, their thirst, right? What they need in terms of staying hydrated throughout the day, but also, right, consider the realities of your life. Right, and what's possible. So you may need to ask for help. We'll talk more about that at the end, because at the time of day that the person tends to be really hungry and they really do a great job of eating, right, that's 10 a.m. And that's what works for them, but that does not work for me as a care partner with my work or other household or other life responsibilities. I may need to prep the meal and have somebody else help out with mealtime, because that's the time that they do their best, right, with eating. Be reasonable in terms of the complexity of the preparation of meals and the coursing of meals, right? We may need to just sort of break meals down and make them simpler, right? Not only for the person who's living with dementia in terms of simplifying and sort of changing palate, changing tastes, but also just in being practical and reasonable with ourselves, right? Having multiple courses can be it just can create a lot of extra work that we don't need to do as caregivers. Having said that, right, most meals have a couple of different components, right? There's a sandwich and there's also a bowl of soup, or there's also some chips or some carrots or fresh vegetables sitting there along with it. Here we have the eggs and the bacon and the toast. There's multiple things here. For many people with dementia, it might actually be helpful to put one of those things on that plate at a time, right? So maybe we're not having traditional courses, but there's an egg course, and now here's the bacon, and now here's the toast, right? Sometimes sitting down to a plate and seeing everything all at once is distracting and difficult for a person living with dementia. So experiment, give these little things a try. A brief word on dining out. I'm going to keep this brief because dining out is not something a lot of us are doing a lot of at the moment, but know that when I email out the materials for today's program, I am also going to include a tip sheet with more information on dining out that might be helpful. But think about restaurants, that you're comfortable with, that they're familiar with, if at all possible. Work with the staff, right? If you have a chance to do so, give them a heads up that you're coming, or subtly say to the staff, right, that we may need some extra accommodations here. At Alzheimer's San Diego, we keep these little cards. They just look like regular business cards. We call them our companion cards. And I don't have one in front of me because, of course, I'm not at the office. But they're just little business cards that you can very discreetly hand to a server in a restaurant, somebody working in a doctor's office, right? Wherever it might be, they're especially handy for restaurants, right? And what they say on one side, I'm going to read this. It says, "My companion has dementia. My companion has dementia and may be forgetful, confused, or overwhelmed at times. Please respond with patience, understanding, and kindness," right? So this is just a way to let the person know we might be eating salad with our fingers at this table, right? So just go with it, right? It helps them understand if somebody says something sort of strange or unexpected or socially inappropriate, right, during the ordering process, right? Please be patient, be kind, be considerate, and understanding. And it also is a wonderful tool for, making our communities a little more, destigmatizing dementia, making them a little dementia friendlier where we can. So work with the staff, consider the menu. You may not want to sit the person down with a whole huge menu, a range of options. If you know something they like, right, just verbally say, "Ooh, I know you've always really liked the lasagna and the salad here. Which one of those sounds good to you?" Right? You might want to do the narrowing and the helping out with the menu choices, right? Consider the person, of course, their personal safety, the accessibility of the seating, and how safe and comfortable the environment is going to be with them. And again, here you see it again, being reasonable, being flexible with our expectations as much as we can. So now we'll get into, and we are going to pause again for some questions in a bit, but we're going to get into some of the techniques for helping somebody with safe eating and drinking. And here I'm going to introduce very briefly this concept that I mentioned at the beginning of the program. The positive approach to care is a method that was developed by occupational therapist Teepa Snow. And again, myself and Jean Alton, who works with me in the education department, and a few other members of our team at Alzheimer's San Diego have been trained in the PAC, the positive approach to care method. So we do actually, in our in-person classes, when we're doing more skills clinics face-to-face, we do teach quite a lot of these techniques. It's a little different in the webinar world. We're doing less of it these days. But I think some of the demonstration, the techniques that I'm going to show you incorporate some of this. And I think generally it's just a helpful resource or a helpful technique for you to know about. But I also want to encourage you to seek out other opportunities to learn more about it. If you go to teepasnow.com, you can watch videos, you can attend webinars. They have all sorts of educational opportunities where you can learn more about this. But the foundation of the positive approach to care is what we call the positive physical approach. Recognizing, remember those brain changes that I walked you through, right? Remembering that a person at any given moment, right, may not recognize you, they may not recognize where they are, they may not understand the sort of social context of this interaction that we're about to have. They may also, and in fact, they very likely have a limited field of vision, right? So when we are approaching a person who's living with dementia, if they're sitting in that seat and we come around from behind them, right, with the fork, with the napkin to put in their lap or the bib to put around their neck, right, if they didn't know that we were coming, right, they couldn't see us because of that limited field of vision. They also have short-term memory loss. Maybe they knew 5 minutes ago that we were in the next room preparing the meal, right? But by the time you arrive and come into their field of vision, they forgot that you had been there, right? So all of those things, we can keep all of that in mind. And remember, I want to make the beginning of this interaction as positive as I possibly can. So what we want to do is sort of give people the opportunity to know that we're coming, right? Sort of wave a hand, say hello, hold up the plate, right? Ooh, dinner's ready, dinner's served, right? Before you come into their physical space, kind of announce, I'm here and I'm about to come into your physical space, right? You don't have to formally introduce yourself, right? If maybe you do, you sort of need to know where the person is in that moment. Hey, it's Amy and I'm here, right? Because lunch is ready, right? Saying something that's very casual, that can often really help a person with dementia sort of connect all the dots. Oh, that's Amy. I'm sitting here because we're about to eat lunch, and that stuff she's got in her hand, that's my lunch, right? A simple statement like that, announcing yourself, doing something to get their attention to looking at your face, right? Whether that's a wave, whether that's putting the plate or the cup, something near your face to get them looking at you. And then kind of offering a handshake if you're wanting to come into their physical space, right? Because you want to sit down next to them and help them eat with their fork, right? You don't just sit down next to the person, grab their hand, grab the fork, and go to it, right? You're going to get lots of resistance, lots of fighting. Instead, you want to sort of get yourself into that helping position in a way that doesn't feel confrontational. So since we're focusing on meals and eating here today, we're going to start in a seated position. We're going to kind of assume that you've gotten yourself into a seat next to the person so that you can help them. But keep all of this in mind. We don't just sort of come in to people's personal space. We stop, 6 feet or so away, make sure that we've got their attention and they know we're coming before we come in and we're close enough to physically touch them. Right, so be sitting in a position that is supportive and not confrontational, right? As you're going to see here in a moment, I'm going to have my husband helping me with a demonstration. He's going to be sitting down. I'm not just going to walk over and hover over him. I'm going to get myself into what's called a supportive stance, right? And in that case, that means I'm going to sit in a chair next to him in a position that I'm close enough that he can see me. He knows that I'm here so that when that spoon or fork, comes in to his field of vision, he knows where it's coming from, right? But I'm not standing, I'm not towering over him. So that's what the positive physical approach is all about. Again, in other skills clinics, we'll focus more on that, on other topics that are less sort of sitting oriented than meals are. But you can learn a lot about this through Teepa Snow on her website or also on their YouTube channel. But the hand under hand technique, this is really relevant to the topic of meals and eating. I'm going to show you here in a moment a short video of my colleague Jean and myself doing a hand under hand. We were practicing this technique back a lifetime ago when we could sit in the same room together and touch each other and be close. We took this short video to demonstrate what hand under hand looks like. What it's all about is recognizing that connecting with another person through the hands is a really wonderful way to sort of get the body kind of kick-started on a motion that it's familiar with, right? So we feel a lot of comfort. There's a reason that shaking hands, which, we're not doing these days, but there's a reason that's a fairly not totally universal, but a fairly universal human sort of cultural behavior. It feels good. Humans feel comfort and relief sometimes, safety, when they feel pressure on the pads of their hands. Our hands themselves are pretty interesting and remarkable. Again, remember, Teepa Snow is an occupational therapist, so she focuses a lot on, the functional use of our appendages. Our hands in particular are very interesting. Just one thing I want to point out is the difference between the types of fingers that we have. Our strength, when you think about how you open a jar, right? You need strength to do that, not really dexterity. You're not really using these fingers at all. Right, your strength fingers are really these 3 fingers, right? Middle ring and pinky. These are your skill fingers, right? Your opposable thumb and your index finger do most of the work of our manual dexterity. Keep this in mind as we talk about how to help somebody with meals and eating. And in watching this video, it's a very short video that I'm going to show you of me and Jean, what you're going to be able to see is that this hand under hand technique, when we get into this butterfly position of holding hands, right? Jean is the care partner in this situation, and I'm the person who's living with dementia. What you're going to see is that she gets into a position, we call it this butterfly hand hold, where my hand is on top. My brain sort of thinks I'm in charge. I'm making this motion. I'm making this movement because my hand is on top. Jean's hand is on the bottom. Her strength fingers, right, are really fully in control. She can really kind of use my hand as a rudder, but she's also got access to her skill fingers. I hope you can see this on my camera okay. She's got access to her skill fingers. So she can pick something up in this case, I think she's going to pick up a spoon. She can pick something up and use it, right, while she's sort of controlling my hand, right? The beauty of this is this motion, right, helping me get into this familiar pattern. My hand is on top, the way that it would be if I were eating, right? My hand is on top of this motion. My brain knows this motion, but I needed a little help to kind of get it started. I feel like I'm in control of this. My brain thinks that I'm eating. It thinks that I'm in control of this. But ultimately, Jean, as my care partner, is in better control of this situation. You also have to consider in both of the examples that you're going to see, both this short video of myself and Jean and this demonstration I'm going to do with my husband in a moment, we're all right-handed in this situation. So you do have to do this differently if the person is left-handed. We all shake hands with our right hand, but we don't eat and drink and, you know, do everything with our right hands. So consider you need to sit on the opposite side of the person if they are left-handed. And that makes things for a challenge for you if they're, you know, right-handed and you're left-handed or vice versa. But you have a lot more ability to sort of overcome the challenge of using your non-dominant hand than they do. So it's kind of on us. Another thing that I'm going to show you, and actually I think you're going to see Jean doing it in this video, is stimulating somebody proprioceptively, sort of allowing them to get oriented to where they are in space. A simple bit of pressure on somebody's shoulder, somebody's knee, pressure on the joints, for example, right? That's going to sort of help somebody feel grounded, and it kind of like closes this loop in the brain, right? If I'm struggling with my fork, struggling to sort of maintain control of my hand and my arm, and somebody closes this circuit, closes this loop by putting a little bit of pressure on my shoulder, it's really remarkable how that changes. It kind of grounds the person. I'll show you a demonstration here of what I mean. So hopefully you're going to be able to watch this. I'm really hopeful it's a very short video, just a few seconds. But what I want to have you watch for is first look at the position that we're in. For those of you that don't know it, this is our education room at Alzheimer San Diego. This was filmed about a year ago. What you're going to see is, you can see we're already in the hand under hand position here. Jean is going to make use of her skill fingers, picking up that plastic spoon that is there, and sort of kind of kickstart my brain in the action of eating. You're not going to be able to hear what we're saying, but don't worry, we're not saying anything. It's really worth listening to. The gentle touch on my shoulder, right, providing me some comfort, some stability. She uses her free hand to get the spoon into her skill fingers. She's applying that gentle pressure on my shoulder. And while, of course, I knew what we were doing in that activity, there is an interesting phenomenon, right, that your brain does. Jean didn't have to tell me if I didn't know what we were doing in that situation. She wouldn't have had to tell me. My brain knows, oh, that's a bowl of soup. That's a spoonful of soup coming up toward my mouth, right? I'm automatically going to open my mouth. So, okay, so just a couple quick techniques to keep in mind. Actually, I think I've probably covered most of this already. Consider where the person is in terms of their vision, right? So this is where having that optometry visit, getting that eye exam can be really helpful. Knowing exactly how much they're taking in as best you can be really helpful. Think about how much sort of finger autonomy the person has. They may not need you to help with the use of utensils. If they can do it, absolutely let them do it. But we don't want to sort of push people to the point that they're struggling, right? So allow them to use as much strength and ability to manipulate as they can, but again, be flexible and let it go when it's not working. Remember those sensory perception changes. If they are about to eat something that's too hot, they may not know that, right? You have to be sort of responsible for regulating if something is too hot or not tasting good to them, right? You need to let it go. Remember the dominant and non-dominant sides. As best you can, give very simple, minimal verbal cues, right? We don't want to talk too much while we're doing all this. It's very tempting to tell the person, okay, now I'm going to do this. Now we're doing that, right? A lot of us were trained in doing that, and we do that when we talk to children, when we help children, right? Because we're showing them, we're hoping that they're going to learn so that they can do it themselves next time, right? Again, remember what I was talking about before. We're talking about a progressive loss of function. We have to be with people where they are in that moment. So keeping your verbal and tactile cueing meaning the touching, keeping that as simple as possible. Cleaning the person's mouth, right? If they're getting crumbs or food on their face or getting food on their clothes, resist the temptation to do that in the middle of the meal, right? Just again, think about letting those expectations go. Try not to do the cleanup as you go, unless it's just really critical and you have to for some reason. There might be a reason, but try to do the cleanup all at the end, because it can be so disruptive, right? We're in the middle of eating and now you're putting this cloth on my face, or just distracting me, getting me down, looking at my clothes instead of focusing on my meal. And again, doing with and not to. Okay. So here's where I need you to bear with me while I get all my technology in line here. Can you go ahead and start that video? Okay, Marcy, let me know if this is not working, but hopefully everyone can see what we're doing here.
Yes, it looks great, Amy.
Okay, great. So everyone, this is my husband, Mark, and he's just gonna be playing along as I demonstrate for you some of what we've been talking about. And Marcy, if any questions come in as we're doing this about this, feel free to just chime in and ask them as we go. So remember when I was talking about the importance of doing things with people, not doing them to them. So let's say I know that Mark is a very messy eater, right? And let's say he's wearing something that's valuable and we don't want to ruin this shirt, right? I might really want him to wear a bib, right? Or, put a napkin, tuck a napkin into his shirt. In all likelihood, that's probably not something he's been doing most of his life, right? If I want him to wear something, the best thing I can do is wear something myself, right? Ooh, you know what? I made a really messy dish for dinner tonight. So let's see, right? We're gonna just put on our wraps and we're gonna be ready to eat, right? If I have my own, I don't happen to have two of these, so I couldn't just put on an identical one. If you have two of the same thing, this works especially well, right? We're wearing the exact same thing. So I put on my little wrap just to say, right, I'm gonna ask you to do this, but I'm gonna do it too, right? So I'm kind of normalizing and making this not a big deal. I'm not making a big deal out of the fact that he needs this. We're just sort of talking about it like, oh, yeah, this meal is going to get really messy, so let's bundle up, right? So may or may not actually need that, but I just wanted to talk about the value, the importance of doing something with the person, right? Rather than just like, here, you're going to make a big mess, so you have to do this, right? So as I was talking about before, not every person with dementia actually needs help using utensils, but often it's not uncommon at all for people to really struggle with just getting started with the task of a meal, right? So I've got a little, I don't actually, but let's pretend I've got a little bowl of cereal here in front of him, and I want him to eat it. I know that he's got the dexterity to use a spoon to sort of hold the bowl of cereal or do however it is that the person eats. I know he physically can do this, but I also know that he's not likely to be able to sort of get the movement started because I know he's got those brain changes that make initiation difficult, right? So if I model this behavior for him, right, I've got my bowl of cereal or yogurt or whatever it is that I'm going to eat, or even just maybe take a couple pretend bites of and I'm going to come back and eat it later, right? I want this to feel like something we're doing together, right? I didn't just put down the bowl and the spoon in front of him and walk away and expect him to eat it, right? I want him to eat it, I put it down in front of him and I pick up mine, right? So doing this kind of thing, I don't actually know what this is called, but when we do this, people automatically know how to follow along. We go, right? Like if I just sort of, make that kind of a face, right? Here. And I start doing it, he knows what I mean, right? Yeah, like all he really needed in that moment. He can hold it, he can eat it, right? He's not having any dexterity problems, but he needed me to sort of kickstart his brain and get the initiation of that task going. So start with just kind of modeling, allowing the person to kind of mirror your actions and see if that helps. I really don't, I mean, I have to talk because I'm talking to you, but in that case, I probably don't need to tell him, okay, now pick up the bowl, now pick up the spoon, right? Because he's functioning pretty well. And I think his cognition is such that he can kind of follow along if I just show him what I mean. So now if I'm supporting somebody who does require assistance with actually using utensils and getting the food from plate into the mouth, right? Then what I want to do, straight please, what I want to do is get myself into that hand under hand position, right? So you start that off with the handshake, and then you get into this sort of helpful butterfly position that you saw Jean and I in a moment ago, right? So his hand is on top, mine is on the bottom here. I'm kind of steering, right? I've got my strength fingers that are allowing me to, you know, if he starts to resist a little bit, starts moving in the opposite direction, he wants to start fidgeting with his hair, for example, he wants to start fidgeting with his hair, right? I've got my strength and I've got my skill fingers, I can like pull it back, right? I also, critically, I have access to my skill fingers, right? So I can do that motion that I was showing you before, right? If this is a fork, right? If this, by the way, is food that requires cutting, do that in advance. You want to use fork and knife together in the hand under hand position. Take care of that stuff in advance, right? So fork the food or spoon the soup or, you know, whatever the thing might be, right? I've got him in this very stable, very comfortable position. His brain really thinks that it's running the show here, right? That little bit of comfort on the shoulder will help with this, the movement, the stability back and forth in this direction, right? And I approach from the front, and again, his mouth just automatically opens because people know what to do, right? They see food coming at them. What I want to also show is that I'm not, you know, yes, I'm sitting over here on his side, but you can see I'm kind of leaning in here so that I can tell that he's looking at me and he sees me. Remember, he's got that limited field of vision. So I have to make sure I'm in a position where I'm fairly sure he sees me before I ever touch him, right, for the first time. So we're kind of working from the assumption that I already got myself safely into the, I made the positive physical approach and got myself into a good position here. Another thing you notice I'm not doing is like coming in from the side, right? Nobody eats this way, right? That's just not a motion that's normal, right? When we're eating, we're coming from our midline, right? So I need to do that with him as well. And it's uncomfortable for me because I have to reach, you know, I have to reach over in order to get into his midline, but that's gonna really help this feel like a more normal kind of natural movement to him, right? And then, you know, if he's made a big mess at the end of the meal, right, I can just do this, go like this, right? I can prompt him to do it by showing him what I want him to do, or, right, I might be able to, you know, get into hand under hand and make this feel like something he's doing, or again, if you know, we've been in a sort of comfortable environment here, I've been close to him and he knows, right, that I'm gonna be coming in, right, if I can like, right, do something like, I get some kind of like consent or, you know, confirmation, you see this, right, when I put this up near your face or touch you with it or undo your bib, right, when I come in to touch you, it's not going to surprise you because you see this, right? So I'm just sort of giving him visual and verbal cues along the way so that I don't startle and surprise. Any questions on any of that before we move on?
I don't see any questions.
Okay, great. And I'm going to let Mark off the hook. Thank you for your help. Okay, so now we just want to talk briefly about the sort of the hazards, the perils when it comes to helping a person with dementia with meal preparation, but also the actual eating of meals. Overeating and undereating, significant things to be thinking about. For the most part, you know, humans are remarkably adaptive, and if we go a day or two eating too much or too little, you know, there's not likely to be really dramatic effects. But if overeating or undereating is a chronic issue, this is something that we want to consider. right? So certainly remembering that if somebody is continuously refusing to eat, please think about the setup, the environment in which you're trying to convince them to eat. Think about what it is that you're asking them to eat. Think about the appropriateness of the task to their skills and to their abilities, but also consider whether or not the person might be experiencing pain, right? In addition to making sure the person's, hearing tests, vision tests, all of this remains important to people that are living with dementia. We also really want to pay attention to oral hygiene, dental pain, difficulty with, the gums, digestive problems. If I get indigestion every time I eat, right? Or I've got, I'm having a bout of pancreatitis and everything I smell is just totally turning me off, right? You're going to see me continuously refusing to eat. So keep in mind, right, make those modifications that I've been talking about. Consider your approach, consider the food, consider the timing, consider the environment, but don't forget to consider that the person may be having some tooth pain. They may be having sensitivity and the hotness or the coldness of the food is hurting, or they might be having some digestive upset. And again, don't assume that they're going to know, that they're going to recognize, right, what those feelings of pain or discomfort are, or to be able to communicate them to you. Remember, especially for people that are living alone, but even for people that aren't, remember food safety, right, that they might not recognize, this doesn't smell good, this doesn't look quite right, maybe this is old and I shouldn't eat it, right? So keeping food that is old or spoiled or food that is trash, right, keeping it inaccessible to the person. Remember, preserving a person's dignity at all times, right? Remembering if I need to get my husband into that bib or tuck in a napkin or, help cut up his meat before he eats it, right? Not to fall into baby talk, not to talk in tones or using words that infantilize that person. Preserve their dignity and consider that you're just sort of coming at this task differently. Now we're going to do this thing together, this thing that you always used to do by yourself, right? We don't often have any need to even talk about what we're doing. We just do it, right? Finally, a really important component of safety is considering chewing and swallowing safety. So here's a little bit of information about dysphagia, swallowing problems. And you can have an evaluation, right? You would want to talk with your doctor if you suspect that the person that you're caring for might be experiencing dysphagia. They do what's called a swallow evaluation. They drink a solution and sort of watch what happens to see what happens as the food or the liquid is coming down the esophagus. This may not be a reasonable test for somebody in the late stage dementia, right? They may not be able to tolerate that. So trust your instincts, right? If you see that they're choking, they're really struggling every time they drink thin liquids or every time they eat solid foods, right? You can sort of assess that's probably what's going on there. This is due to changes in the cortical regions of the brain, a shrinkage in the cerebral cortex in particular, and then messaging that's coming from the cerebellum. That's what sort of makes our esophagus do the right things with the air, saliva, liquid, and food that's coming down. So it's just a matter of the brain kind of sending the wrong messages or not sending messages at all. Again, it's common in the late stage of dementia, and it is high risk, right? Because this could interfere with a person's ability to get enough nutrition, to drink enough, to stay hydrated during the day, and it can cause aspiration. This is actually very common in late stage dementia, wherein people get food and liquid into their lungs because of the dysphagia, and that produces an aspiration pneumonia. It's actually a very common cause of death in persons with dementia. So what can we do? First, I'll just say there are experts, right? Please consult with the physician who will probably refer you on to an occupational therapist or a swallowing specialist. A speech pathologist in particular may be a referral that they would send you to help you come up with some solutions, right? But a couple of just very basic quick tips. Don't ask the person to be eating or drinking when they're still sleepy, right? Certainly not when they're lying down. You want to have them as upright as possible. I don't know if you caught it in our little demonstration here. At one point, my husband was kind of hunched over, and I asked him to kind of straighten up. You know, you're just gonna, you're gonna eat better. All those muscles, everything's gonna do its job easier if the person is as upright as possible. Of course, keeping bites and sips as small as possible. Using straws, there's definitely mixed advice out there on that. I think this is another one of those places, those areas where you just got to know your person, right? Whether or not a straw is going to be helpful. For the most part, for most people, straws are going to get harder for them to navigate. So having, if it is something they used to drink from a straw, right, pop the top off and have a small cup that they can hold comfortably, probably with both hands, right, and start drinking from the cup directly. Getting enough hydration is always hard, but it can be especially hard with people with dementia. So giving lots of little sips of liquid throughout the meal can actually help improve the quality of their swallowing function. And it also helps just get a little extra hydration in during the day. And don't forget that oral care, right? Taking a quick pass, right, with a toothbrush or a swab, right? Don't get your fingers in between someone's teeth. No matter what, we've all got that that chomping reflex, and you never know when it might strike. So don't get your hands in a dangerous position there. But having a rinse with water, brushing teeth, flossing, right? Whatever you're able to do, do attend to the person's oral care after those meals. So Marcy, any questions that I can answer for now?
Yes, I have 2 questions on spitting. Any suggestions you have? One person says that mom has started spitting her food. Food's an issue because sometimes I make multiple meals because she won't eat. But if we go somewhere, she'll ask for McDonald's. So what do you have to say about that?
What? I'm sorry, I missed the beginning part. I missed the part about the spitting. Can you?
Sure. There's 2 people who are asking you for suggestions on spitting, and then
Okay.
one person just asked for suggestions. The other is more specific, saying that there's multiple meals, etc.
I see. So taking in something and then deciding they don't like it and spitting it out, that's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean, again, this is something that there are limits to ways we can respond and things that we can do. Right? When you watched me sitting there demonstrating with my husband, right? I've got the hand, I've got the rudder. There's a lot I can control about what goes into his mouth. There's not too much I can do once it's in there, right? He's got that autonomy, whether I like it or not. So if he's gonna pocket it, pocketing is when you stick they just sort of move the food into this little space between the teeth and their cheek, and it stays there and you can't get them to get it out and swallow it, right? You might have to wait that out. You might be able to get in there and sort of move it around, but you might not be able to. Absolutely, they've still got spitting reflex. They can spit that food right out at you. That may absolutely happen. So it just comes down to sort of being as pragmatic as we can about this. They don't feel like eating this in this moment. Is the bite too big? Is the bite too small? Are they confused about what exactly it is that they're eating? Right? Are they confused about the motion? Maybe if you sit down and take an appropriate size bite with them, right, they might be able to see, oh, this is something I'm supposed to keep in my mouth, right? And kind of follow along with you. If you show them that you're chewing, right, you make a big show of swallowing and showing them your Adam's apple as it's going down, right? There might be things that you can do to kind of prompt that. But you might also just get the food spit back out. So this is, again, comes down to us being flexible, adjusting our expectations, using bibs and napkins as much as we can if we think that stuff might get spit back out, and trying again later, right? Try a bite of a different food next, or maybe just this isn't the right time. There's too much distraction. They're tired, right? We'll try this again in another 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Great. Amy, would you say that the loss of complex coordination and processing, like the ability to use a fork, is more indicative of advanced Alzheimer's?
Oh, really good question. And no, and I'm glad that you asked, whoever asked this question, because I don't want somebody who's caring for someone in, pretty early on with dementia, who's struggling with fine motor skill, to think, wow, this person must be much further along than I thought. Right? People are very unique. People are very different. and the ability to manipulate a tool, a utensil, a fork, to remember how to use a straw, right? These are things that involve many different regions of our brain all at once. And so it could just be a matter of a simple misfiring, right? Two neurons did not connect the right way today. And today I could not use a straw, but I could do that yesterday and I might be able to do it tomorrow, right? So don't necessarily, I'm giving you I have to talk in kind of broad generalizations, but absolutely people could have swallowing difficulty in the very early stages of the disease, not just in the late stage. And so too with the loss of fine motor skill. This really can happen at any time.
Somebody's asking, what should they do if choking does occur?
Well, this is where, I mean, this is an emergency situation, right? If somebody is actually not able, I'm not a proponent of, learning the Heimlich maneuver and intervening in an emergency situation. You need to call 911, right? You need to get some help if somebody is actively choking. If it's a matter of, aspiration, right? There's that, right? They're having a hard time clearing it, getting it out, right? Getting them upright, maybe getting them walking around, moving around. Might actually help. Or, if they were sort of leaning back, getting them sitting up straighter, asking them to take another sip of water, right? If that's not going to cause more choking. It's really person and situation specific, but no, I am not advocating that you should learn how to do the Heimlich and engage in that. This is probably dangerous and going to be not well understood by the person with dementia, that we would consider, choking to be an emergency situation and get some help.
Okay, great. These two questions might be something for the physicians to answer, but I'll let you see, Amy,
Sure.
and decide. How many calories a day should someone in the end stages be eating a day? Is the standard 1,200 calories per day still a good guide, or should more or less be served?
Yeah, unfortunately, that is not a question that I can answer. And actually, I'm not sure that it's an answer anybody could broadly answer. It's really, a person's basal metabolic rate is very unique and very individual, and it will certainly change over time. The very general thing that I will say about that is to not panic, not to be worried if caloric intake in the very late stages of the disease is dropping dramatically. That is normal. That is to be expected. Tell the doctor about it, right? We want, or consider hospice, right? This is an appropriate time for hospice if we see that a person is unable to take in enough calories to sustain their weight and they're losing a significant amount of weight. We definitely want to get physician input or hospice provider involved. Yeah.
Okay.
We're at our time here.
Are we at our time? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Do you want to, tell me.
Let's see here. I think that this is the last one
Okay.
sort of along those lines. How many boost or other supplement drinks is it okay to give in one day?
Oh, again, you'd really want to talk with a nutritionist about that, a dietitian, or a dietitian, not me. I can't really give nutritional advice. But what I'll say very broadly is that if a person is just not enjoying savory foods or things they need to chew, you're really struggling to get in those calories, but they like the boost, right, or the supplement, we're generally, you might have to adjust, other things that they eat throughout the day. You might have to buy a lower sugar version of it. If the person has diabetes, for example, and you need to worry about their sugar intake, but generally get those calories in, get those nutrients in how you can. It might just be a temporary phase that they're going through where they don't feel like eating too much, and the use of some supplements is going to kind of get you through this difficult patch. If you consider it a temporary measure to get in those calories and get in those nutrients, right? If you need to give them a few a day for a couple days, this is probably not a big deal, but we don't want to make that their permanent diet on an ongoing basis. But a really good question for your healthcare provider.
Great, thanks, Amy.
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap things up here and just make sure you know where to go for additional support. I just kind of want to take a deep breath and acknowledge, I've asked a lot of you. This is a lot for any one person to be thinking about, all day long. You also have to feed yourself, by the way, and maybe other people in your household, maybe children. You may also, I don't know, have a job. You may have other responsibilities in your life. And all of this takes so much thinking, so much energy, and so much time. We do recognize that. So we're really not expecting you to do this all by yourself. You're going to need some additional support, right, in navigating how to set up the meal, how to time it, what foods to prepare, right? We really don't want anybody navigating these waters all by themselves. Not to mention, even if you could, right, maybe you don't have a particularly picky eater, but the work of, going through all of these techniques, all of this slows down the eating, the meal preparation, the cleanup, right? It slows down this process a lot. So even if you don't need like technical support, right? You don't need medical intervention or the help of a speech pathologist, for example, right? What you might need is some time, right? You might need the ability to step away and do some other things or engage in some activities that fill your cup so that you have the energy to come back to this and keep doing this day in and day out. So when I talk about reaching out for support, I'm not just talking about hiring an in-home care some in-home care help. I'm not just talking about consulting a nutritionist or a pharmacist to ask that question about medications. All of those types of experts are helpful and we need them, but sometimes what we need is somebody to come over, right, and sit with this person while they eat, right, or sit and enjoy that meal with them. So know when it's time, know when your cup is empty and you don't have too much left to give, right, and reach out and get that support before the cup has emptied out. Have a safety net, not just for them, but for yourself as well. And if you need resources, this is what we're here for at Alzheimer's San Diego. Marcy, I'll ask if you could, if you haven't already, if you could put out in the chat the link to our social work follow-up request form. If you're looking for, a respite program, if you could get some in-home care, get a volunteer, right, who can accompany you. Maybe right now that's going to happen virtually, but somebody who can be company during mealtime so you can step away and get a little bit of a break. Right? If you need to find a new neurologist or a provider, somebody who can refer you on for those speech therapy, PT, OT referrals that I've been talking about, reach out at Alzheimer's San Diego. Our social workers can connect you to those local resources. So this is us kind of in a visual presentation. The range of free services and support that we offer at Alzheimer's San Diego is vast. We have our amazing team of social workers, dementia experts, Marcy being a member of that team. We have support and discussion groups. Of course, you found our online education program. We have volunteers that help in a variety of capacities, like Nancy, who's with us here today, who help out on our tech team. We also have volunteers who make daily check-in calls to people with dementia who, daily or weekly, check-in calls to people with dementia who live alone. And they also provide companionship, right, making virtual visits. Even just if right now having somebody come into the home to help you with care tasks isn't what you need, maybe it would just be nice to have somebody who can kind of pay a visit and be a friend, right? And again, just let you have a few minutes to yourself. If you're in need, if you're going out to the restaurants and you're in need of cloth masks, we have volunteers that are sewing, and we have a beautiful selection of cloth masks, reusable masks at our office. We can mail some to you. We have counseling sessions that are offered by our licensed clinical social worker for care partners who are particularly struggling during the pandemic and the additional stresses that it is causing. So if we can connect you to any of these resources or other community providers, adult day programs, right, case management services, please fill out that form that Marcy is sending out. Let us know what you need, or if you don't even know what you need, just put your name in it. Tell us how to reach you. We'll give you a call and we'll help you figure it out. Again, everything that we offer at Alzheimer's San Diego is provided at no cost. So you can get lots of great information on our website, We have a pretty robust library of recorded webinars that are available to watch, as well as some educational videos, tip sheets, and lots of good information about dementia. You can reach out, again, just call our office, email us at info@alzsd.org, or even live chat us when you're visiting our website. If you've just got a quick question, you just want to ask somebody right then, you can use live chat or that form that Marcy has sent out. You can use that and we'll reach out to you. A couple upcoming programs, just want to make sure you're aware of. Next Wednesday, the 28th, if you want to know more about Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia, we cover that in a lot more detail in Dementia 101. We talk about brain changes, we talk about diagnosis and treatment, medications and such. If you are thinking ahead to what might be in store for you in the late stage of the disease, I encourage you to come November 5th. We'll be doing our Preparing for the Late Stage program. So I appreciate your patience. I know I've gone over here today. Would love your feedback on this program or other things that you're looking for from our education program. Again, I appreciate you bearing with me as I fumble around a little bit here today. But we absolutely are always trying to improve. We welcome your feedback. When this webinar closes, you'll be directed to a survey. It's anonymous and it's super quick. We'd love to hear from you. And again, we'll email you a copy of the slides, some extra materials, and a link to our webinar library where you can find a recording of this program if you need to see it again or you want to share it with someone else. So with that, I will wrap things up. I will acknowledge, I know there's lots of questions that we didn't get to. Remember, that's what our social work team is here for. Let us know, fill out that form, submit your question, or just give us a call, and we'll be more than happy to talk with you about your individual situation. My thanks to Nancy for being here with us here today to support me and all of you in the ins and outs of Zoom webinar, and my deep thanks to Marcy, who I know has been very busy in the Q&A and the chat, for being here to support me and all of you in this program. So with that, I'll go ahead and close the meeting. Thank you for coming, and I hope we'll see you again at another program soon.